Tim is titled a senior writer at ESPN. We're just going to talk to him a little bit about what he does and how he does it, why he does it, and in an age, as we, of course, talk about all the time, Tim, in a day and age when you have to be multi-platform, you have to be good at especially at the level you are, at the expectations you have to do podcasting and writing online and in the magazine, long forms, and have opinions and all of those things.
Yes.
So, how long have you been at ESPN now?
I have been at ESPN for 15 years.
Okay, and before that, just give us a quick little bio maybe on yourself.
Okay, well, I graduated from Washington State University.
Go Cougs!
Go ahead.
I said go Cougs.
Oh, yeah. I don't know where they're going, but they're going somewhere. I worked for a couple years in small town journalism, started small, ended up getting my first break was I got a job at the Sacramento Bee when I was probably 23 years old. Then from there I ended up at the San Francisco Chronicle, which is where I met John, and I worked there for about 8 years, the first 4 covering the Giants as a beat writer for the San Francisco Chronicle. Then from there I ended up at ESPN. Worked for a year as a columnist. I was a columnist for about 5 years at the Chronicle. The last year of that, I was kind of doing double duty, working for ESPN, the magazine, as a freelancer when that magazine first started. So then after that, after a year of doing that, I figured that those 4 magical letters ESPN were going to carry the magazine, and I wasn't going to be putting my family's well-being in jeopardy by launching, by tying myself to them. So that's a tortured way of saying I've been working for ESPN for 15 years. As a senior writer for the magazine, I write a column online, do some television when I can't avoid it. All those kinds of things that we have to do, as John said, in this age.
So when you say you can't avoid it, some people sign up, I would guess, with the understanding that they have to do television, but you don't have to?
Well, no, I do have to. I do probably 2 or 3 outside the lines features a year, and then I do occasional appearances on television, whether it's on I've been on everyone from Olbermann to SportsCenter or whatever, depending on what. Most of what I do that's video related is an offshoot of what I'm writing. I don't do a lot of specific television stuff. It's almost always an adaptation of something that I've done for the magazine.
So you would consider yourself, if you were to describe yourself, you're a writer, what we used to call a newspaper writer or a magazine writer, longer form than shorter form. Is that how you would describe yourself?
That's what I do best is the long form, that's become the term now, magazine writing, anywhere from 2,500 to 6,000 words. And I do probably 12 to 15 of those a year. So I keep pretty busy.
So then we can infer from that you can spend 2 to 3 weeks at a time on a piece, or do you get that much time?
I do. Yeah, generally I do. What I was going to do was kind of take you guys through a story that I just finished last night.
Awesome.
Just as a way to sort of make it kind of real. It kind of give, it's fresh in my mind, and I can kind of provide you a kind of an overview of what I do. So if that's okay, I'll do that, John.
That is a great idea. I love that. They're going to have to do a very modest 1,000-word longer form story later in the semester. So. Okay.
Well, the story I just finished revising late last night was it's a profile of DeMarcus Cousins of the Sacramento Kings. And a couple times a year, generally for every sport, I would say every major sport, we at the magazine devote an issue to a theme called One Day, One Game, which is we'll take an NFL game, for instance, and we'll just blanket coverage it. We'll have 10 photographers there and 10 writers and all kinds of stats people and whatever. We'll just sort of try to condense an entire NFL experience into that one game. Everything from, the guy that lines the field to the starting quarterback. And this year with the NBA, what they decided to do was take it's kind of a tortured idea, but it's 2 games, 4 teams, 1 state. So what they did was they have a game between the Clippers and the Warriors, which are the 2 sort of more marquee teams that are playoff bound. The other game was the Kings and the Lakers. And so I got a call from the NBA editor. He asked me, of those 4 teams, is there anything that I'm really particularly interested in? And I said DeMarcus Cousins, because I've been fascinated by him as a personality and as a player. So anyway, as the story goes, the game, we're supposed to base much of what we write on this one game. If you remember, he was actually suspended for that game. He ended up punching a guy from the Rockets in the game before that. The NBA looked at the film and said, "Sorry, you can't play in that game." So my one day, one game guy was not even in the arena, which presented some, as you might imagine, sort of some tricky situations as I was going forward as to how to write him into this game that he had nothing to do with. But we still had to do the story. And so my first task is in going through this, and this will touch on some of the themes that I like to, talk to people about, is you're trying to tell a story. As you look to write like a longer form piece, the main thing you want to do is you want anecdotes, right? You want to be able to tell. It's the old show, don't tell idea. You want to be able to show how this person, who he is, what he is, he, she, whoever, whether you're doing a specific individual, you're doing a team. So my first goal was to find out where he was during that game. I knew he wasn't allowed to be in the arena. I wasn't even sure he was going to be in LA. So it turned out that what happened was he flew down to LA to do some business with his agent or something. He was in the hotel right across the street from the Staples Center. He planned on watching the game. So he went through the channels 2 or 3 times before he realized that the hotel didn't even carry the network that the game was being carried, that was the game was on. So I figured, I mean, this is like a really cool thing for me that he's sitting there flipping through the channels. It's a way for me to connect that game to him. And also in a larger sense, kind of write that, they're not here and he's not there. It's kind of this isolation and the idea of kind of a, this kind of like a child in timeout, I mean, he was kind of relegated to this room without even the game. So, as you'll see if you read the magazine in a week or so, that's the opening anecdote, is this guy sitting in this room trying to find his teammates on television, can't even do that. And a lot of what I try to do is get fine details. I mean, that's kind of the I don't know, that's kind of our sustenance in this world, is you need details. I mean, there's one thing to say, that a guy, for instance, Cousins, I was at his house last week, and he was sitting he has this 13,000 square foot, incredibly impersonal house in this gated community that is like just staged furniture and stuff. There's nothing personal in it. And he's a 23-year-old guy in this huge house, and he's sitting on the counter, his kitchen counter, eating Uncrustables. And so this enormous guy, and that alone was kind of a cool thing, at least because it just sort of, to me, it kind of shows his youth. You can talk about, how much money he has and the public persona that he has. But what was most interesting is that he was peeling the outer edge of the Uncrustable off and putting it aside. Like that was fascinating to me because it sort of defeated the whole purpose of the Uncrustable, which is that there is no crust, and he was still peeling the uncrust off it. So, just things like that that I generally, that you try to find, you try to find things like that. You try to be an observer, and as I've done it, the more years I've done this, 10 years ago, maybe I wouldn't have even noticed that because I would have been so, concerned with the next question I was going to ask or something.
Simply put, we can look up how many points he scored. We can look up where he went to college. We can look up that biography. It's so easy to get to. What you need to do for your sustenance as a writer is to tell me something I don't know. Give me an observation that I don't have access to, I, the consumer,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly, and I need to put you somewhere that you couldn't go without me. Whether it's that hotel room or whether it's in that kitchen. I need to give you a reason to care about this person. Which brings me to another point, and I'll make this quick, is that a lot of, I think as the evolution, as I've gotten more comfortable or more confident in what I do, I rely less on preparation, which is kind of weird because we always were taught in journalism school you want to prepare, you got to go in with an idea of where you're going and what the person's about. And to some extent that's true, but I think that if you get too involved in that, I find that if I read too many things about somebody, I'm over-prepared and I'm not maybe ready to write my story and my observation of this person because I might be too influenced by what somebody at Sports Illustrated or Grantland or somebody else wrote about the person that I'm profiling.
Yeah. About 20 years ago, you wrote a book about a high school basketball team, and you've written several books since then. What was did you learn something about this form by acquiring the information about reporting for something that had to be 300 pages long in a book?
I did. I learned a lot. I learned that it's somewhat painstaking to do that much work, and a lot of it is a joy. I mean, I love what I do, and I don't complain about any part of it. But there is a daunting aspect to sitting down and writing 300 pages about when starting from a blank slate, and that experience really taught me that you can't look at it as 300 pages, right? You have to look at it as one word leading to the next. It's the old one day at a time, one game at a time thing. You really have to say, all right, I'm this chapter, and then I move to this chapter, and it happens sort of organically. But it's like anything. If you sit, I've found myself thinking, okay, I have 5,000 words to write for this story. And then I look at some magazine and I think, gosh, that story's 5,000 words. Look how many pages that is. Look how much gray there is on that. It can be overwhelming. So you sort of you really have to take it as a in pieces rather than be overwhelmed by the whole.
And the idea of this storytelling, and we talk about this, and hopefully it's true and you can confirm it, the idea of any storytelling is for you to write it and transition the themes and get the reader from one paragraph to the next, from one chapter to the next, from one story to the next. And that's the whole idea of writing, is to keep them compelled, and you have all of these techniques and things you use to get them there, right?
Yes, exactly. And I think going back to the Cousins example, I'm starting with him in this hotel room, so that's a perfect jumping off point for me to tell about why he was there, his reputation, what has trailed him throughout his career, and more importantly, to get at this story, since everybody already knows all that stuff, is that it kind of flew in the face of this concerted effort that he's been making to not be that guy who's sitting alone in that hotel room, and and wanting to be someone who's seen as for his talent rather than his personality or his failings. So yeah, I mean that's one of those things that kind of falls in your lap, and you're like, oh wow, I can run with this one.
Who reads magazines? We hear so often about the death of long-form journalism. I don't believe it, but what's the demographic, and are you concerned about that?
I'm not really, but because I think that it's strange because it seems like this whole long form concept is kind of in a renaissance now. I mean, you're reading it online. There's there's a school of thought that what's getting squeezed is that middle form rather than the long form, because people are reading Twitter and they're getting turned on to longer form things, and there's sort of it's sort of both ends. People are reading the long stuff, but they also want the quick take of just give me a headline essentially. So I think that there is a place for it. I think that one of the things, as it's become more incorporated onto the online world, where, like, for instance, my stories will end up online, and oftentimes they look kind of cooler now. I mean, the way they've done incredible design online has really, I think, made it less daunting. It doesn't look as 10 years ago, these stories online were, it was hard to read. Now they've found a way to make them more pleasing to the eye. And I do think, obviously the magazine world is an older demographic, supposedly. But we at ESPN, I'm outside the demographic because we try to hit that sort of 25 to 40 or 18 to 40-year-old demographic. And, we're selling, our subscriptions are about 2.5 million. So, we're somebody's reading it, whether they're reading every word, I don't know, but I think that there's a place for it, and I think that obviously being part of ESPN and being able to, we're not on an island, we're incorporated inside all of whatever ESPN entails, which helps us because you can find us easier than some other places.
You also do opinion pieces. We read a couple of them this morning. You do opinion pieces, which, this is a rhetorical question, but which is need to be reported just as deeply and as valuably as anything else you do, correct?
They do, yeah. I mean, I think that that's kind of becoming somewhat of a lost art as we get into more of an argumentative culture where, everything on television is, I'll take this side, you take that side. Nothing against that because it's made ESPN a lot of money, that whole first take mentality.
That's my editorial opinion.
Yes, but I think there is a lot of you have to, especially now with so much out there, and so, like, you guys know so much more about sports just because you have access to it than people did 25 years ago. You can't bluff, you can't fake it. You have to really have something behind you, or else you'll get weeded out pretty quickly.
Yeah, we're going to get some folks asking some questions here.
Please.
But the nature of what you write, though, even though it's not primarily an online audience, is the basic rules haven't changed. None of that has changed, right?
No, it hasn't. I don't think I haven't changed from that. I think that mostly what's changed for me is just what I've been writing. From the time I was in newspapers till now. I mean, the variety of experiences that I've been able to draw on over the years of being around all these different types of people. In the last year, I've spent 5 days flying around the country on a private jet with Floyd Mayweather, and I've hung out with DeMarcus Cousins, and I've hung out with Theo Epstein of the Cubs down at spring training for a few days and talked about how you build a baseball franchise. All these things. The next thing I'm doing is a cover story on Teddy Bridgewater, the quarterback for the NFL draft preview. So that part, all those experiences have changed. They've opened doors for me to be able to, draw on different experiences, meet different people, kind of assess, observe, all those different things.
We're going to get some questions here, but you talked about the process doing 12 or 15 of those. So you're almost always writing something and reporting the next piece. Is that what it is?
It is. Actually, this... The stretch I'm in right now, the Cousins story is the second of 3 stories that I was reporting all at the same time, and I would not want to do that again because it got a little bit, I was going different places, and I was reporting the timing of it worked that I had to be in certain places at certain times for access. They all happened at the same time, so now then I have to go back and sort of sift through the different interviews and keep, make sure that when I'm writing about Teddy Bridgewater, I don't drop a DeMarcus Cousins line in there or something.
That would not be a good thing.
No.
Okay. All right. So Oscar's going to get it started here, and then we'll
Okay.
get some questions for you, Tim. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Oscar.
Hey, Oscar.
Which do you prefer writing, long-form storytelling or opinion pieces?
I've grown to like the long form stuff a lot better. I think it's a little bit more suited to my talents. I can summon a good, I can summon up a good rage occasionally for sports topics, but for the most part, it's not. I don't have. Sounds funny, but I don't have that many opinions. Like I don't care that much about who wins or who loses. I care about the people, as John would attest. When you are in this business, you sort of get to know people and you root for them individually. The long form stuff is way more suited to what I like to do. It's deeper. It allows me to write more. The opinion pieces I like to do, for the most part, but occasionally I don't have that strong of an opinion. So the coming up with the topics has actually gotten harder as the years have gone on, because I used to be, when I was young and reflexive and opinionated more, I always had no trouble. But now it's like, God, what do I really think about that? I have to kind of ask myself.
We read a couple pieces this morning. One about Bud Selig and taking credit for the anti-doping era of baseball, if that's, and another on the hypocrisy of college coaches coming and going and getting better jobs and making more money. In a bit of a sense, there's sort of some moral outrage there, which I don't think we see enough of in journalism. Do people respond to that? And I don't mean it to sound like it's sort of highfalutin, but it really is. There's some moral outrage, indignation involved in that. Does that resonate with people?
I think it does. I think it resonates both ways. I mean, especially the college sports topic is a huge thing, because there are so many people who just can almost infantilize these college athletes. Like they shouldn't be getting anything. They're getting a free education, without looking at what all is going on around these guys and what the coaches are making, what the schools are making, what the NCAA is making. A guy that walks around in an orange blazer representing the Orange Bowl as a rep for that guy's making $500,000 just to shake hands with people. I mean, the whole system is so corrupt that, yeah, there is moral outrage there, and I think that it is something that people maybe need to get a little bit upset about. I dislike the whole the childish way people treat college athletics when. If any of you guys in the room there has a great idea for a book and somebody's going to pay you a $500,000 advance to write it, go for it, right? But an athlete whose jersey is being sold in the bookstore, and is making a fortune off, the school's making all this money, he sees none of that. And I think that, I just see it's a real, yeah. So, yeah. I guess I do have an opinion there.
And some people sort of laugh it off, and this is just, sounds like a, sports talk throwaway line, and it sort of is. But Rick Pitino the other day was joking about the big difference between him and his son. His son's a coach at Minnesota. He said, well, one of the big differences is he wears Joseph A. Bank and I wear Armani. And he threw it off as a funny line, but that tells you an awful lot about Rick Pitino, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And it also tells you about the status, the structure that, you can look at, say, John Wall has a 15,000 square foot house, so DeMarcus Cousins wants one, and we roll our eyes and say, oh, come on. But look, those guys are playing by the same scoreboard. Theirs is, what car, what suit, what, that's the same game. It's just that because they are seen as, these paternalistic guys that are leading these wayward young men to manhood. It's sort of, they get a pass.
Well, we won't even go to Calipari. Here's Matthias.
Hi, my name's Matthias.
Hey, how are you?
I have two questions for you. One is, you said you don't care who wins or loses the game. Do you think that grows out of your being a sportscaster for that many years? Or sports writer, excuse me. And number two is, when you write a story, like, how many eyes look at it before you turn it in? I know you're the editor and stuff, but...
Yeah, the first question is, yes, I think that my I do care. I mean, I watched the games all weekend, and I cared about teams that I never thought I would care about, right? I mean, I'm rooting for, Mercer. You sort of root for the story, and that's kind of the way it goes. I root for people, and I root for stories, and that is a byproduct of the fact that I'm, you kind of lose your fanhood a little bit when you get into this business. That doesn't mean you lose your enthusiasm. That's a different story. And a lot of people don't lose their fanhood. I find that a lot of sports writers, especially when it comes to their college connections, have really strong rooting interests. Because I went to Washington State, I mean, that's kind of hard. So,
But you went to the Edward R. Murrow School of Journalism.
I did,
Yeah.
and I went to UC Berkeley for 2 years too. So I kind of have the most unusual transfer in college history from Berkeley to Pullman. So I have that going for me. But yeah, and the second question was how many eyes. That's a good question. What happens is we have a bunch of layers of editors at the magazine. Each sport has and I get the titles wrong even after 15 years, but I would say it's like an associate editor who is in charge of a specific sport. There is a deputy editor who is above that person, who is what we call the top edit. So initially, I file my stories to the lower level associate editor, who, reads them, sends them around to all the editors, all the top level editors, which is probably about, on average, probably 6 people, depending on the story. Sometimes a couple fewer, maybe more if it's something sensitive. And then they all sort of converge and give their opinions, and then things come back to me through this associate editor. So the guys above kind of keep their hands clean, which sometimes drives me crazy because I don't know who's suggesting something. If I need to argue a point, I'm arguing with somebody that might agree with me, but he's trying to keep his place in the corporate structure, so he's not going to give away the. So there have been moments. I've been there long enough that I really like the people I work for. We have a good thing going. So. And in
the big picture, as frustrating as it might be, that you have to go through so much of that. More eyes is better than fewer eyes, because it really is about making a good product.
It is, and I think every time, there are times when I will file something and nothing will be done to it. Like, and I'll feel really good about it. And there are other times when I'll file something and I think, okay, I got a feeling they're going to question this, and they're going to think that this structure maybe doesn't work in this place. And I'm usually right. I have a pretty good feel for it. But you're right. In the end, sometimes you're so invested in something that you just want it out of your hair. You just want to say, hey, somebody else needs to read this so that I can even figure out. Because you get to the point where you've read it so many times, you've made so many changes that it's not even recognizable to you. You don't even know if it's good or bad anymore. And those are the times when you need a trusted editor to say it's good or it's bad.
Yeah, writing is the process of rewriting, isn't it? Here's Victor.
How you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. My question is, going from the San Francisco Chronicle to ESPN, is it different as far as being able to obtain sources? ESPN has all the money, so to say. So is it easier to get sources when you're working for ESPN, or is there somebody who does more of it for you, or is it all just the same?
That's a really good question, because that's one of the big changes in journalism, is just the fact that, and I benefit from it, but I can still kind of see the downside of it, is that you do get, ESPN is like the pixie dust. You can really call almost anybody and get an audience with them. You can get access to people. That's a lot harder. I can get into places. For instance, this DeMarcus Cousins story, I guarantee you that nobody who covers the Sacramento Bee on a daily basis has ever been to his house. And I decide, we're going to do this magazine story, and all of a sudden the doors open. I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's a good thing for me, but I've been on the other side of it as well. And it gets frustrating when, you're covering a team daily and, some national guy parachutes in and all of a sudden he's getting stuff that you couldn't get just because you're not there. You don't have the access. So, yeah, it's a very good question, and it's very true that you do get a lot more. And as far as sources go, just to make a quick point on that, generally I get all my own interviews. There are times when we have people on our staff that are kind of called wranglers a little bit, where they have connections with people. Their whole job is to facilitate interviews and photo shoots and things like that. So sometimes I rely on them if I know that they have a connection that maybe will get me there faster.
Okay, great. Next.
All right. Hi, I'm Brian.
Hi, Brian.
All right. You said that when you do TV, it's an offshoot of what you're writing. Considering your writing is really critical, do you take a different approach on TV than you do in print?
Not really, and I don't know that the stories that I do that are critical, which is probably like an opinion piece, those generally wouldn't be something that I would do like a television feature for. I might be called upon. I wrote something about when the Richie Incognito thing broke. I wrote a column about it, and it got a ton of attention, and I went on SportsCenter and all the different TV shows and a few radio shows. But that was mostly just to talk about it, right? To be a guest, to say this is my opinion, to sort of go back and forth with people on who might have a differing opinion. But as far as like a feature, a television feature, those are for instance, like the last one I did was on a guy named John Moffett, who played for both the Broncos and the Seahawks, quit football midseason this year. Those two teams are in the Super Bowl. Going back and talking to him about what that's like is sorry.
That's okay.
That's my sweet phone ring. So anyway, yeah, it just turned out that guy got arrested about 2 weeks ago for being drunk and stupid. But yeah, the opinion pieces are separate. They might occasion a quick hit on TV, but not anything with any depth.
This is my comment that doesn't require a comment from you, but that if you talked on the radio and television just to get attention, you could be a host of First Take. Here's Monique. Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I guess. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Monique. I just had a question. So, how much time do you usually have to spend with the subject in order to get enough for your story? I think you mentioned that you spent 5 days with Mayweather, and then you were also in a hotel room with Cousins, and then also you went to his house. So, how much time to spend on average?
Well, it's funny because when you talk to people and they say how much time will you need, you really don't want to put a cap on it. You kind of want to say as much as you'll give me, because you'd rather over-report something than under-report it. Sometimes, there have been times when I've been promised, 15 minutes with somebody, and a quarterback during the season, say, or a star running back who's in demand, and you just have to make do. You have to talk to maybe more people outside that person. You have to kind of ask the right questions and get them going on somewhere. Those stories are toughest because you don't really have the color and the sort of the observation if you're sitting in a sterile room with somebody.
I mean, the best report, as Josh makes his way from the back of this massive room, the best written stories, or maybe the question here is, it's easier to write a good story if it's better reported, correct?
Exactly, and that gets back to details and anecdotes and asking the right questions. Well, I haven't even touched on questions in interviews, and one of the things that I almost always ask somebody is, and it sounds kind of silly, but I say, can you tell me, if I'm talking to someone's mother or a teammate or whatever, can you tell me one story that encapsulates what this guy's all about? Can you give me a story about something that happened when you were with him or on the court or on the field or whatever that people don't know about him that you think really will tell somebody a lot about him. And I've gotten a lot of great people. It makes people think in terms of stories rather than just, oh yeah, he can do anything he wants. He's really fast. He's strong. All that stuff that is just a waste of time. If you can focus people to telling you stories and thinking in anecdotes, it's really, that's the reporting. And if you can pile enough of those on top of each other, then you can work your way through 3,000 or 4,000 words.
Okay, Josh.
Hi, my name is Josh.
Hey, Josh.
So when you get to spend this much time with all these athletes, are they usually willing to share information with you? And how do you personally deal with those that aren't?
It kind of runs the gamut. I mean, obviously, when I was a beat writer, I covered, as John will tell you, we were in the same clubhouse with Barry Bonds for several years, and that was an unwilling subject. But I kind of, in a way, I don't know if I appreciated it, but I was okay with him because you knew what you were going to get. It wasn't one thing one day and something else the next. But most of what I do, I kind of need cooperation from somebody. I can talk to 10 other people and not the athlete, and I've had to do that before if somebody has said they're not interested, and you pretty much say, well, we're still going to run this story whether you talk to me or not. Oftentimes they come around and they'll at least answer a couple questions. But yeah, I think that if someone's uncooperative, there's nothing you can do about it, but you just sort of have to develop kind of a thick skin and realize that if your job is to write the story, you got to find another way.
Yeah, and this is the problem we had. Who's next? This is the problem we had, of course, covering Barry Bonds, and there have been others too, and that is you can't let that seep into your reporting. You can't let that lack of relationship or that acrimonious relationship seep into your reporting, because frankly the consumer doesn't care, and they like that person more than you do usually because he's their player, he's their guy.
Interesting quick story on Bonds. After I covered him and was working for the magazine, I went back to do a cover story for ESPN when he was, the year he hit, he broke the home run record, and I'm in the Bay Area. He had a 10-game homestand. I started the first day of the homestand asking him for time. Every day he put me off. Finally, the last day, and he knew I was local. We knew the whole thing. The last day he said, meet me tomorrow and we'll talk before the game. Tomorrow happened to be the opener, or actually it was probably the Friday night after. This was a Wednesday. Was an opener of a series in Montreal. So instead of driving to San Francisco, I had to get on a plane and go to Montreal and spend 3 days or so. It was a real hassle. But the crazy thing about it was, and John, you'll probably understand some of the psychology of this as well as anyone. When I got to Montreal, he pulled up a chair and talked to me for an hour and a half. And it was one of those things where you say, okay, do I tell everybody about the 10 days that I spent chasing him, or do I tell people about the hour and a half where he was engaging and bright and combative and all those things that he is? Well, in the end, nobody knows except us and people that I complain to that I spent 10 days driving back and forth to Candlestick at the time and ended up in actually it was AT&T, but ended up in Montreal. So anyway, that's
and you've lived in the Bay Area all this time anyway.
Yes.
So yeah, why not why not go to Quebec? Why not? We have a second timer here. We have another first.
Okay.
Wealthy's got a next. We have some second timers here, and I know your time is tight here.
Oh, we're fine.
Okay, cool.
Hi, my name is Wealthy.
Hi, how are you?
Good. What is maybe a must do or maybe don't do for us going into the new journalism that you've seen?
Well, I would say that the must-do would be to be as versatile. It's kind of an easy one, but it's what John's talked about, and it's very true. If I was starting out right now, I probably couldn't get away with being so sort of, I don't want to say anti-video, but it's just not what I want to do. The television stuff is nice to do occasionally, but it's not something. A lot of guys, that's all they want to do, right? They would love to get out of the magazine writing because they see the future as video. So there's so much happening in terms of digital video online. Podcasting's become so popular. The one thing I would say to do definitely is to be versatile, but also to be smart. You have to. The best way right now, like I tell people, find something that you really like and go after it. Or an underserved market. Like if you're interested in MMA or something, there's so many opportunities out there to write about that sport. Or auto racing, just the things that not everybody's into, because I think it's going to be harder to be a generalist as we move forward. So many people, especially to start, you almost need, you can't be, I see a lot of young people that write, well, I have a blog, and they tell us, and I'll go on this thing, and they'll just be telling me who they think's going to win the game tomorrow. That doesn't cut it anymore. Nobody really cares about that. Nobody cares about your bracket or about what you think of how the Dodgers are going to do this year. Everyone's got that opinion. You need to provide some insight and some specific knowledge that tells an employer basically that you are someone who is going to bring something to the table that isn't just already out there. It's not just a reflexive, this is what I think. No, we don't. Eventually we might care what you think, but right now we really don't.
Okay, next. How's it going? My name's Steven.
Hi, Steven.
It sounds like you got a great ethic in your career, and I was just curious as to if you characterized any specific aspect of sports journalism as like a golden rule. What do you believe is like the golden rule of sports journalism?
I think it sounds kind of hokey, but I'd say that there's a certain, this word is overused, but I think fairness is kind of a golden rule. Is that you want to sort of realize that you're taking somebody, you're taking a snapshot of their life, and we all have good days and bad days. You have to be to sort of make it and to have a good reputation. You sort of have to be fair to people. Now that doesn't always mean being nice to them or apologizing for them or excusing bad behavior. But there's a level of fairness that has to be in place, or if you're just that guy that screams and yells and says everyone's an idiot and you hate this and you hate that, it's going to affect what people think of you. It might get you in the door somewhere, and it might be sort of a novelty act for a while, but in the long run, if you treat people fairly, if you show interest in them as people and not just as objects, because a lot of the athletes that I deal with they come at this with the whole idea that they at times do feel objectified, justified or not, it's a reality. So that's that's kind of I don't know if that's a really good answer, but it's kind of an umbrella thing that I go under is, if somebody deserves to be, the old journalism rule, which is comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, that's kind of that there's an element of fairness there too. The people that deserve to, get jabbed should be jabbed, but doing it just for your own sake, to bring attention to yourself, is not a good way to go.
Right. Matthias, anybody else? Did you have another question?
Yeah.
Yeah, Matthias is stepping up to the plate for a second time here.
All right.
All right.
We've batted through the order. I like it.
Not quite. Yeah, there's quite a few people still sitting on the bench.
Okay, well, I can only see the people that show. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Is there someone that you've ever interviewed that you've kind of like geeked out over? And if so, what's your best advice to not do that? Be professional.
I have to say I have not geeked out recently, but I think that it's a really hard thing when you start, and I'll tell a brief story. When my first job was in a little town north of Sacramento, and to get myself into a major league locker room, I basically volunteered to cover the Sacramento Kings for this little paper. I didn't get paid for it, but I went to every home game so that I could put myself in that. That's what I wanted to do, right? I didn't want to cover high schools for a living, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I didn't. So this was like 1986, 87. So I was going into these games. I was talking to Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. I mean, all these people were still active, and just the team. Even though the Kings were terrible, these were professional athletes. These were guys. So I was a little starstruck often. I mean, I was, you know, I was one of those guys that I pretty much had to have a question written down, or else I wasn't gonna get it out. You know, it was something that was hard for me because I wasn't naturally, you know, that extroverted. Now I can go pretty much anywhere and talk to pretty much anybody and and at least be able to carry on a conversation and make people feel somewhat comfortable. I mean, I've done, you know, I also spent, you know, I did a cover story on Yasiel Puig about in January that, you know, that tested. I mean, here's a guy that I have nothing in common with. You know, he's a kid from Cuba who grew up in a way that is so foreign to me, and now is living in a way that's so foreign to me because he's, you know, one of the ultra wealthy and, you know, ultra popular people. So, you know, the geeking out phase is probably over, but I think that the best way to realize is that they're human beings. I mean, when you stand there and talk to somebody and you realize it sounds weird to even have to say that, but when I was your age, that was what I had to tell myself, is that he's just a guy, you know, and if he wasn't doing this, if he wasn't putting a ball in a basket or hitting a baseball for a living, I would have no trouble talking to him. So why should that be a barrier? It really shouldn't be.
As somebody else steps up here, a quick little anecdote here. The first kind of big name guy I ever interviewed, I'm a kid in Hastings, Nebraska doing television. I talked myself into the Kansas City Royals to get a pass for the weekend. And George Brett can't be not 5 years older than I am, maybe. Okay, so but George Brett by then, of course, by he's 20 years old, he's already a big star. So I walk up to George Brett and I say, "I'm John Shrader from Hastings, Nebraska," and he looks at me like I'm from a man in the moon. "Can I talk to you?" And he goes, "Later, talk to you later." Couldn't have been more rude. Couldn't have been less interested in what I was doing. Made me wait all the way through batting practice. Didn't look at me, and then I'm about ready to give up, about ready to walk away, and he says, "Over here, kid." I mean, I'm 5 years younger than he is, maybe. "Over here, kid." We sit down, do the interview. Couldn't have been more slick, couldn't have been more interested, couldn't have been more wonderful and colorful.
Yeah.
We stop the interview. He doesn't even say so long, just dismisses me and walks off and does his whole thing. I get an introduction pretty early on. I was geeked, but then I learned an awful lot about the way the game is played. Yeah.
And then that, you know, to bounce off that, you have to make a decision. What do you reveal about that? Do you reveal the nice guy that gave you time, or do you reveal the ass that treated you poorly every other minute?
Because so many people say, "Wow, you got to go to the clubhouse in Kansas City.
Right.
Wow, you're in there every day." You know, they don't care about our problems, do they?
No, and that's something I've stopped even. You know, people say, "Oh gosh, can I carry your notebook? I'd love to do." You know, very successful friends of mine that would give anything to do what I do, and I used to. There was a period where I'd say, "Well, no, it's not all that great. Let me tell you about this or that." No, I don't do that anymore because I number one, I don't have complaints. I love what I do, and number two, nobody wants to hear that. You know, you want to hear the good stuff. So I give you the good stuff.
There's a guy on Bay Area radio, Rod Brooks. He said years and years and years ago, and when Barry Bonds was still talking. Sorry, I'm talking to the back of everybody here and talking to you as well. But he said some caller was talking about Barry Bonds, and Rod Brooks says, "Oh, the people who don't know Barry Bonds don't like Barry Bonds." And I called him up right off the air, and I said, "You've got it just backwards. You've got it completely backwards. The people who know Barry Bonds don't like Barry Bonds. The rest of the people don't have to deal with him." You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So here's another one for a second time around in the lineup here. Then we'll call it quits here in a couple minutes.
Okay.
Is there something you feel you need or want to accomplish as a writer still?
Yes. Getting back to, you know, book writing is that we have four sons who are just, the youngest is now a senior in high school, so we're starting to see this light at the end of the tunnel where, you know, not that sounded wrong. I should say
No. Been there, done that. I know what you're talking about.
Where everyone's going to be out of the house, and I'm going to be less tied to a school schedule or a team sports schedule or whatever. And because of the situation of having a family and having a full-time job, I haven't been able to devote myself as much to the kind of book writing that I would like to do. I've written 7 books, but 6 of them have been collaborations. And a lot of them have been very successful, and I've enjoyed doing them, and I've found that I'm pretty good at doing them, so it's not a complaint. But as far as something that I want to achieve, it would be that. It would be to sit down and to write more of my own books, fiction or nonfiction, I don't know. I mean, but it's something that going forward, that's it. That's what I would like to do.
One more question here, but what sells better, Dennis Rodman or the Pawn guy? The Pawn family.
Dennis Rodman.
Okay.
Dennis Rodman.
What was
You
the
know
name of
what's
that book again? That's
really-
been quite a while, though, but that was like the definitive Dennis Rodman, This Is Who He Is book, probably 15 years ago or longer? How long ago was that?
It was 1996.
Wow.
Yeah. It hit right as he was reaching his peak of pop culture fame, and not the guy that we see now.
Do you ever talk to him?
I do not.
Okay. And so you couldn't counsel him on what he should do in North Korea when he was there? He didn't call for your
No.
advice?
He didn't call for my advice. Actually, there have probably been times in his life where he would have been better served calling me for advice, but
Anybody, right? Anybody. Okay, last one. Victor's coming to the plate again here and there. Well, thank you so much for your time. We
oh
appreciate
sure,
it.
I enjoyed it.
All right, kind of going back to DeMarcus Cousins, the public opinion on him is that he's a hothead and he has like an attitude. So when you were interviewing him, did you try to portray that, or were you trying to find out something different about him? Like, what was your approach?
Well, my approach was that I had talked to so many different people. I had done a story about a Kentucky basketball assistant earlier in the year, and we got to talking about DeMarcus, and I found that the people that know him have a completely different opinion of him than the people who just watch him play basketball. And I have a friend who's DeMarcus's business manager who would tell me stories about what he was all about, and the fact that he's kind of an interesting guy because he does a lot of like community and charity work, but he refuses to let his people publicize it. He doesn't want people to think he's doing it. He's got this real obsession with being real, keeping it real, not being a phony, and not being seen as somebody who politics his way through the NBA, which he feels a lot of guys do. So yeah, I kind of came in with that idea, like let's see this other side of him. He's never been in trouble with the law. He's never really done anything other than be sort of petulant and whiny on the court. And in this case, I really did think I was dealing with a guy who maybe had a bad rap. You look at, everybody says, well, he leads the league in technicals. Well, he's got 15 technicals. Blake Griffin has 13. Blake Griffin is everybody's All-American. He's selling everything on television. Everybody loves him. And DeMarcus Cousins is a pariah. For what? They're basically the same passionate guy on the court, but they have different facial expressions. That's kind of the way I thought of it. So, yeah, I mean, I did, in this case, I did set out to find the guy behind, that frown or that wince that you see on the court.
You made me, as we sign off here, it made me think of something as you were saying that, and the sort of some advice for everybody is you never know for sure where your next story is coming from. You're talking to an assistant coach about another story,
Yes.
and Cousins comes up, and he says, Cousins isn't like that. He's really not like that. So always keep your ears and eyes open because you never know where you're going to find your next great story, right? Exactly,
and every source that for instance, I went back to that Kentucky assistant to talk to him about Cousins for this story. So it's another, it's a overused word, networking, whatever, but you really do, it's part of being observant. I mean, you talk to somebody, you have to be, I might not care that much about who wins a game, but I'm very curious about what goes into playing the game. So I'm asking questions about different people. What's this guy like? I feel this about that. Sometimes I get surprised. Somebody will say, no, you got that guy wrong, or, you're right, or whatever. But it sparks stories down the line, and it kind of, it's just a natural curiosity. And as you get more comfortable talking to people and opening up different lines of conversation, you do find that it goes places.
Do you keep notebooks full of story ideas and just jot things down that might be an idea one day?
Oh yeah, I do. It's mostly, it's mostly Word files, and I can never find them when I need them. But yeah, I'm always writing something down. And I've got, Post-its on the wall here and different things that I try to keep up with.
All right. Well, thank you on behalf of our class here, and thank you.
Thank you guys.
Hello, there they are. Okay. And I appreciate it. I'll give you a shout here in a little bit, but
Okay.
thanks a lot.
Well,
I know
good luck to
didn't
you
get up-
guys, and my last bit of advice is listen to Professor Shrader. He's done a lot of things, and you guys are lucky to have him.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. See ya, and
All right.
congrats. You got almost all of them out of the house, so
Yep.
there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Okay.
All right, John.
With
Take
a
care.
bunch of people who are still in the house don't necessarily appreciate
No,
that.
I know. Yeah.
All right. See you later. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay.